Um, Father Mena, which I don't know what your name was before you were ordained, but started off in Kenya as
It
somebody
was
else.
Mena.
Oh, it was Mena. Okay. Started off as
It was
Mena.
an easy adjustment.
An easy adjustment. And served in Kenya for 11 years, combination of layperson and priest. And that's where he met his beautiful wife, Grace. And together they are serving right now in Maryland at St. Mary's Coptic Orthodox Church. And they have two beautiful kids, 2.5 Abigail and 10-year-old Luke. Everybody who gets to know them gets to know their kids. And I think you'll see, I think what I really love about both of you is how down to earth, relevant, easy to get along with. The first time I met you, you made me feel like I'd known you for years. And I think you just do that with everybody that you meet. And just the fire that you have for Jesus, the flame is always bright. So thank you so much for joining us. And we're just going to leave the rest to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're really happy to be with you guys tonight. And so I'm gonna talk about something, and I'm gonna share my screen here. Just give me a minute. I kind of wanted to talk about, like, with everything that's happening, like you look around you, whether you know the whole COVID-19 situation, or all of the turmoil that's happening in general, whether it's with the Black Lives Matter movement, or or the people who are protesting peacefully, or unfortunately those who are rioting, all of that. And you can kind of like start asking yourself, like, God, why is this all happening, right? And why? And I kind of I know we wanted to talk a little bit about being a multicultural couple and all of that, and we will talk about that in a minute. But I really felt like, with everything that's happening, it was on my heart to talk about what are some of the lessons that we need to learn from this. And let me just kind of go here and open this up with you guys. So, like I said, one of the things is, why is God allowing us this to happen? And first thing is, some people say, oh, God is punishing us. Some people say he's angry with us. Some people will say, is he disciplining us? What is it? What is it? And, if you turn on the news for like five minutes, you'll see all the different storms happening across the world. You'll see, I don't know, there was a story about locusts that's happening in India and all of this. And it can be very, very, like, kind of overwhelming a little bit. And you can start to try to calculate and say, why is this happening? And why is God allowing all of this to happen? And so instead of us saying, why God, it's a lot more productive for us to say these three things. First is, God, help me learn from this. Okay? Help me learn from this. Second is, strengthen my faith so that I'm able to cope with this. And then the third is, give me the ability to see you in the midst of all of this. Okay? These are three things that we really should be focusing on right now. And that's very hard for us to kind of do or put into perspective when we ourselves are in the middle of it. And I'm saying that, I'm going to get off sharing the screen here because I'm going to share my beautiful wife's face with you guys. Like, it's hard for us to kind of say these things when we're in the middle of it. And the reason I say that is because I found myself right in the middle of it. Okay. Right in the middle of it, as someone who is married to an African woman who, is Black, my son being Black, my daughter being Black, and all of that, like, it could be overwhelming. And so I wanted Grace to kind of share with you guys how it's been making her feel and what she's been kind of dealing with. And I'm sure you guys have heard her speak in different platforms, and not to kind of keep repeating the same thing, but I think it plays such a big role, an important role, to understand how we are really feeling, like, and so, and with everything that's happening, what is the reason this is happening? So I'm going to let Grace share with you guys real quick.
Thank you, Mena. So I think mostly I have to say that I've come from far. Like if we were having this conversation a couple of weeks ago, maybe let's say 3-4 weeks ago, it would be different than now, because I feel like God is so good that with every passing day, He's giving us so much peace, and we're getting to see Him. We're getting to see His hands in everything, because these are not conversations we would have ever had, because that's like, again, a non-issue in our church. The issue of race is not something we discuss. It's not something that we think should be discussed, because after all, we are going to church. We have Sunday school. We have all the spiritual, things that are laid out for us to learn, and we would not have these discussions. I think what I'm grateful for is that these times has allowed me to have these conversations with people who truly, some of them are very, very innocent from the way they are, looking and handling this issue. In the beginning, it's very easy to, for people to come across like they're being, and I know that racism is very, very common in our church. But again, also there's a lot of ignorance, and also a lot of not understanding, not knowing, and that really is the biggest problem, that people don't even know that they are racist. People don't even know that what is happening to their brothers and sisters. And I'm going to talk about in America. I don't know whether it's the same story in Canada, but here it's very, very easy to be like oblivious of what is happening, because we're all in our own, bubbles. You go to church, you come back home, you go to work and you mind your own business, then you come back to your Egyptian community. You don't have anyone that you relate with that does not look like you, does not worship like you. So it's very, you watch, what do you call this, those Arabic channels at home. You watch everything that's like Egypt related or Coptic related. So you do not, you're completely cut off from what is happening. And I think this time has allowed me to, like, people who have been even in this country for a long time, who have been like, Grace, do you actually think that, we are racist? I'm like, I wouldn't say we, I would say, some people are knowingly or unknowingly. And then it opens up conversation of people. I'm talking about professors, doctors, people who are like, I didn't know that it's that bad. I'm like, it is, and the reason that I know, it's because I feel like it relates to me directly, because I'm a person of color. I know that I would probably not face these things every day, but I do feel very, very bad for the church and the community to turn a blind eye, and not to like know that these are things that are happening. What can we do as a church? We us having that conversation has been truly healing, and that's why I'm saying like it's something that needed to happen. God had a purpose for it, and also the fact that we are also at home because of the pandemic. It helps, like, reach more people and talk about these things, and like try to ask people to be compassionate, be loving, be open up to understanding your more than your community. And I really truly admire what the SMSV does in everything, even with the pandemic, with the is it the lunch drive that the church has been, those things that really put you in a position to show that love of Christ that we're supposed to be doing. And it's been amazing just how God is using these times. Like I said, I have healed quite much. I wouldn't say that it's still not difficult. I'm still, and the thing is that I still see a lot, and I think my question is, what can I do? And that's the same thing I'm saying. We should, all of us, ask ourselves, what can we do as a community? What can you do as an individual in your little efforts of trying to show that you're either in solidarity, or you understand what other people are going through, and you care, and you want to be part of the solution. So it's something that we're still, every day I'm still like asking God for guidance, even like in the littlest way that we can, whether it's going to be like picking that phone call and talking to someone who I know truly that they look at the situation in a very political way, and it's Trump versus what's the other person's
Biden.
Biden. So I, like, just feel like it's not, let's not talk about it, the politics. Let's separate ourselves and let's talk as human beings, as, how do you feel when your brother is suffering? If this was your fellow Egyptian, what would you do? We all get very, very upset when our people suffer, when we hear the church has been bombed, or when we hear different things. And I think we should have the same passion and the same anger towards our brothers in this country that truly have paved the way for us to be able to be here and to enjoy and to flourish in this country. And I think, that's what we are at. And I think also just asking God for guidance every day. We have to, to think, and for sure we have to pray and ask ourselves, when is the right time to even educate our children? Like Luke is 10 years old, but we do have to think, like, sometimes I think he's gonna go back to school, and I'm like, please Lord, I don't want the pandemic to stay for long, but sometimes I'm like happy that he's learning from home. This is because I want to shelter him, because I'm worried, like, if he goes back to school, what kind of things, because of everything that's happening, what's going to be the ripple effect, on the kids, on the school, on everything in the in the community where we live in, and where he's going to be exposed to, because we want him to understand, but at the same time we don't want him to know hatred. We don't want him to think, to grow up thinking like he has to be concerned about nothing, like just because of his existence he has to learn things that really no child should learn, or no young adult should have to learn. But that is the reality, which we still ask God to give us wisdom to be able to deal with as he gets older, or at the time avails itself. Because every time, like, even like having small conversation with him, it's like, I don't want to talk about it, and you can tell that yes, he hears, he sees, like, and he doesn't want to deal with it, and that is okay, for now. But I know that those are things that we as parents have to think about and pray for God to guide us to know what to say and what to do. So yeah, I think I just have to say that it's just a wake-up call for all of us, because we would not have been talking about this to, like, think and ask God to guide us on what to do in the little that we have in our different areas, whether it's at work, whether it's at school, whether it's at home with our parents. Because mostly, unfortunately, some of the worst conversation that I've overheard or have been, people that I share with from home, where parents and children are they're not getting along because they're just completely divided, because they don't want to believe what they don't want to see, and they're completely, like, against, and they don't believe there is, but at the same time they are, and the children call them out. So it's like educating either the young people or even each and every person on how to approach some of these very, very hard subjects, especially with our immediate families. So yeah, so it's still a journey, but I am glad that we've started taking it. Yeah.
So as you can hear, and this was a very, I'm going to switch back here for a second. It was a very emotional time, obviously for my family, and going through it. So again, you look at all this, and you kind of ask God, again, why, right? Why is all this happening? And so we're going to go back to this real quick, because I think it's so important. Again, we look at everything around us, and it can be very easy to fall into despair. And I'm saying this for myself personally, as someone who obviously was, through the COVID-19 thing. As a priest, you were getting calls constantly that someone is passing away, or someone is critically ill, or, and it gets overwhelming. And then obviously this situation with George Floyd, and everything that's happening hit home very much for me and my family. So you can very easily fall into despair, and like I said, ask why. And when we start to ask why, it's good to have that relationship with God. But I think there's some things that I've learned during this journey. And the first one from Romans 11:33-34. He says, "Oh, the depth of the riches both of wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments and his ways past finding out. For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has become his counselor?" And very easily, what he's saying here is that we don't fully know why, and we'll never know why. Some of these things are happening around us. In Daniel chapter 4, verse 35, all the inhabitants of the earth are erupted as nothing. He does according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. No one can restrain his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" Okay. Even if God explained to us his sovereign reason, like, we will never be able to understand it. We will never be able to comprehend it, because it is beyond our wisdom, beyond our understanding. And one day we will understand when we go to heaven. But the one thing I do know, and the one thing that I'm sure of during all of this, and I want to assure all of you, my beloved, is that the one thing I know is that the Lord loves me, and he does everything for my sake. And his love to me is immeasurable, as it says in Ephesians 3:17-19. May Christ dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the width, length, depth, and height, to know the love of Christ, which passes all knowledge. Okay? I know that his love is immeasurable for me, and I know that there is a purpose for everything that is going to work for good, as it says in Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. So one of the stories that I've been really studying again right now is from the book of Job. And I think we need to understand kind of the background of what happened with Job in order for us to understand this. Because Job, I always say, is 42 chapters, and many of us know the first chapter and the last chapter, but we forget the other 40 chapters. Okay, and it's important to know that. I think it's important to understand the life of Job. So real quick, like I said, we know his background. So Job was blessed with a family of 7 sons and 3 daughters. He had an immense wealth. He enjoyed a high rank. And Job was, as the Bible says, was the greatest of all people of the East. Okay, so he was very well esteemed, very, very highly esteemed, was very wealthy. All of that had, everything that, you can imagine. And then what happened? The disaster strike, right? His children were killed, his wealth was lost, his possessions destroyed, his servants killed. He was afflicted with painful sores from head to toe, and his wife told him, "Curse God and die." Okay, so like that's the background of the story of Job. We all know it very well, but we forget, like I said, the other 40 chapters, because in that, okay, during that time, Job protested. Okay, Job turned to God asking for an explanation, and that's exactly what said in Job 30:20-23. I cry out to you, but you do not answer me. You have become cruel to me. With the strength of your hand, you oppose me. You spoil my success. Okay, and it's like he demanded not only to complain, but asked for a reason. And this is like actually really important for us to understand. Like, we need to go to God asking God, why is this happening? And what do you want me to learn from this? What is it that you want me to learn? Help me to learn how to love more, how to care for my brothers and sisters more, how to root out any racism that I have in my heart every single day, how to really be the man or woman of God that you want me to be. We need to ask God, what do you want me to learn from this? What is it that you are looking to teach me? And that's, Job protested with God. He loved God and he wanted to hold on to God, but yet he was questioning and he was wondering, why is this happening? And that sounds like very much of what's happening today, right? It sounds very familiar to me. Like, God, why is this happening? And explain it to us. And God is ready to give us the answer, okay? And what was God's answer? And this is a beautiful thing, and I love the way God answers this, okay? God didn't answer Job directly. He did not answer Job directly, but rather God raised the question about the mysteries of his creation. If you read from Job 38 to 40, God laid it down for him. That, God asked Job if he was present when God laid the foundation of the earth. He asked him if he understood the laws by which the tides of the sea were controlled. He asked him about the habits of various birds and animals, obviously knowing that Job couldn't answer this, okay? But he gave it to him. He said, look, this is all the things that have happened. Were you there when all of this was there? And through God answering in this way, he wanted to direct Job's mind to two truths, okay? The first one is to remind Job of his finitude. He does not know everything, okay? That he has a limit. He has a limit to what he knows and what he understands. And God is telling us the same thing. Your mind is limited, but hold on to my love and hold on to who I am and hold on to the fact that I care for you more than you care for yourself. And how do we know that? Because he not only was he able to, he should not be surprised, okay? He should not be surprised at failing to comprehend fully why he was permitted to suffer. Like, he'll never understand that. And the second thing is to reveal the wisdom, power, and love of God demonstrated in his creation. So God wanted to raise his mind to remind him, you are limited to what you understand. And that's what he's reminding me. You are limited to understand this, but remember of who I am, remember of my wisdom, remember of my power, remember of my love. And that's what I'm showing you by the details that he gave him about his creation and where he was from the beginning. And so what we do know is that God was in essence saying to Job, if I am caring for the details of the universe, do you doubt that I care for the details of your life? And he's telling me and Grace and all of you the same thing, okay? I care about the details of your life. I care and I have the ability to solve your problems, but do what? Trust me. Trust me and know that I have a good reason. I'm permitting these things to happen. I'm allowing for this to happen in our society today. Remember that I love you is what we need to remember. That God always loves us no matter of the turmoil that's happening. So what was Job's confession? Job 42, 2-6 is one of my favorite quotes, one of my favorite verses in the Bible. And it was Job's confession. He says, I know that you can do everything and that no purpose of yours can be withheld from you. You asked, who is this who hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore, I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Listen, please, and let me speak. You said, I will question you, and you shall answer me. I have heard of you by my hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore, I abhor myself and repent in dust and ashes. It was only through the tribulation. It was only through the hardship and losing everything, okay, where he was on the brink of wanting to kill himself because his wife cursed him and was telling him, curse the Lord. And look what he says. He says, it was through all of that that I now have actually seen you with my eyes, not just heard of who you are. And that's what I'm learning through this, to be honest, is that through this hardship, through the difficulty, and being kind of serving in Africa for the time that I did and my time there, I've learned that this is exactly, we've seen so many hardships and so many difficult times while we were there, but remembering always that it's through those hardships where we see God's hand even more when we realize who he is. So what Job learned a lesson he would not have learned otherwise. Okay, he would have never learned that lesson to begin with. And just to leave you here with James 5:10-11, my brethren, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord as an example of suffering and patience. Indeed, we count them blessed who endure, who have heard of the perseverance of Job and seen the end intended by the Lord, that the Lord is very compassionate and merciful. Okay, and that honestly is what God wants us to do right now, is to learn from all of those that have come before us, and to say, okay, Lord, I trust you, and I know that if I hold on to you, I will be that Christian that you desire for me to be, a godly Christian who sees no partiality, who sees only with a heart of love every single one of my brothers and sisters that I see every day, that I interact with, that I truly have this heart of love, and that God roots out any kind of, racism or hatred or anger or anxiety or fear, any of those things from us. All right. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen, and please, any questions or comments there. Tried to tie it in. I felt like it was so important for us to, like, right now it can be so easily get caught up in just focusing on, whether it's the lack of justice or racism or, all of the miserable thing that's happening with COVID-19 and the cases that keep going up, especially here in the US. And it can be very easy to kind of lose track of, okay, like, and I'm worried about this from a lot of our youth who are like, okay, well, they disconnected from the church, they disconnected from God, because they're like, oh, why is God allowing all of this to happen? And so I felt like it was so important for us to focus on, well, you know what, we can't answer that, but how can we learn from it? And what is it? Because I struggled with it. I'll be very honest with all of you guys. I struggled with it myself because of seeing, and Abuna can I'm sure can say the same thing, when you keep hearing of all the bad news that's happening with the coronavirus, and people were dying and people were in ICUs and all these things, and then after that to be right in the middle of that storm of seeing a man die the way that George Floyd died, and then knowing that you are in the middle of this because of who you are as a Christian first and foremost, and your responsibility. And then obviously as a priest and as a husband, all of that kind of was overwhelming. And so I had to kind of sit back and restudy the book of Job. And if you haven't read it, all 42 chapters of it, not just one and then 42, but all 42 chapters of it, you'll understand a man who really struggled with so much around him, but held on to God, but was willing to talk it out with God. And we need to do the same thing. Any comments or questions? Thank you guys so much for having us, and we're blessed by you guys always, and praying for you guys, and ask that you guys pray for us as well, please.
Thanks for the talk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abuna and Grace. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Not so fast for them, Mena and Grace. We hold on to you for a few more minutes.
Sure.
Can you give us some practical advice or practical steps that we can take collectively, but also individually, to combat racism in our midst, within the community, within our families, our views on race relations and things of that sort? And this could be inspired by your own personal experience or things that you generally advise to maybe your church community.
Me or Grace, or both of us.
Go fast.
So I honestly, Abuna, I think with a lot of youth, just talking with them about this recently, kind of wanted them to have the history and the understanding of what has been happening to, kind of African American communities throughout this country, and for them to understand and to go back and to learn more about this issue. Because I think when we try to have these conversations and not understanding the background of, why my brother or my sister is struggling with something and is going through something here, that there's a reason why they're in the place that they're in right now, and the situation that they were kind of put in. And if I don't learn it, then I will have an uneducated conversation. And so one of the things that I've been really kind of telling our youth is go back and learn about the history of, the kind of the systematic racism that's been happening in this country for so long, and that it is deeply rooted, and it's not just something to be taken lightly or superficial, or because we tend to live in a bubble, something that we are not willing to go out and learn about. So that's been something that's been kind of on my heart a lot with our youth recently, is for them to learn more about that background and kind of understand it so that they can have an educated conversation about it.
I think just to add on what Abuna said, I think from my own like interactions with people and small talks based on what has been happening, what I have come to realize is a lot of us, or rather, especially in the Coptic church, they think they take things lightly, like it's a joke, like it's okay, that's how people talk in Egypt. But I'm like, but we are not in Egypt. We are in America. There's some things maybe you can say and it's acceptable, but it's not acceptable here. Just like the same way you have to learn like different things about a country and all that, there's no way you can just say that, oh, but it's, they don't mean it. That's how Egyptians talk. We have to be aware of those, that's how we talk, because how we talk is not okay. And how we talk hurts someone else. We have a lot of different, either it's our friends or it's our people we work with, or like, even visitors to the church, like people who are different than us, and whether we like it or not, we tend to be like cliquish, like, I've been in this church for a long time, these are my friends, and, and it happens to me because I'm very outgoing, so it's very easy for me to go and get lost with like a bunch of Egyptian people and forget that one person who came, and then I look back and I'm like, oh my goodness, nobody talked to this person, and the only person everyone is waiting for them to interact or like entertain this one visitor is the other Black person in the chat. So it's all our responsibility to make sure that we make everyone welcome, because I could feel that this is my church, but I don't feel like everybody in the church is taking me as one of them. And it's and sometimes maybe we don't do it intentionally, but it's good to be aware, like just pay attention to your surrounding when you're at church, and know that, because maybe you're not being racist just by not acknowledging that other person. You're just not paying attention, and that person will feel like, oh, this church is not, that much welcoming. And I'm sure, the advantage that SMSV has is that I want to assume that it's predominantly English, like everyone, most of the people will converse in English, and that's very, very easy for like newcomers in the church. So you can imagine a church that most of the people will just go into little groups and speak Arabic, and so you're left thinking, oh my goodness, where do I go? And if it's not at church, even at social gatherings and all that, then the other thing that I found out is that people just don't try to learn. Like I don't want to repeat what Abuna said, but that's really what it is. Like we don't educate ourselves on matters of what affects other people, because it doesn't affect us. Just because it doesn't affect you doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Just try to learn what is happening with other people, and truly just understand what they're going through, and maybe what the church can do. And I think that's where my big question is coming from, is like most of these problems that we're seeing, the majority of the people who are affected or who are having this issue are maybe our parents, who truly, again, it's cultural. They're coming from a culture of, Egyptian, and safeguarding that cultural and that family and all that. I mean, Egyptians just stopped marrying their cousins the other day. So you can imagine that now you're going outside of, the Egyptian culture, and you're going now, from the family to now outside of that culture. So it's not easy for them to accept. And it's our duty to like teach them, but with love, not like, oh, you don't, it doesn't have to be a fight where now you end up losing and you end up not discussing it. It's like asking God to give you the wisdom to like bring that subject and talk about it with love and making reference to like, facts. Otherwise, you will not have the conversation because they're, people who are older, they have their own way and they're used to a certain way of thinking, and you will not shake what they believe. I think, that's, I don't know. I think I'm still learning also, but I'm still learning because we have a long way to go. And that's why I said I'm grateful that this happened, because we are able to think and see what can we do and what can we also do in our Sunday school curriculum, what can we teach the kids. But more importantly, I keep thinking it's more what can we teach their parents, because it's not about teaching, it's about doing, acting, talking at home, what are we praying for? What are we, how do you relate to your neighbor or your friends who are not Egyptians, like small things.
I have one question.
Some questions.
One question I had is, it seems like the racial divide has been getting worse in the Trump era as opposed to the Obama era. How big of a role do you think the president has to play in the racial divide, and what can we do politically to motivate change?
I think so. We're not going to get into the politics aspect of things, but I think honestly, I think learning that as Christians, like, what is our role towards our brother and sister, like no matter what, because I feel like governments will change all the time, right? And certain laws will come out and certain laws will change, and all of that, like, and we've seen bad leadership in the past that have led to disastrous things and whatever, but it passes. And so the question is, how do I deal during that time, right? And that's what we have to make sure that we are, again, building our relationship with Christ, really kind of putting on that heart of God every single day myself. And that's how I deal with every situation, whether it is, the whole Black Lives Matter movement, or against, leadership, or whatever it is, that I deal with it with the heart and mind of Christ every day, because his word will never change. So, you could have, all this different leadership change over time, but his word never changes. And my response should never change to what's happening, whether it seems, kind of out of what's normal or what we think should be normal or whatever, because what's normal to you might not be normal to someone else. And what you think is bad leadership could be good leadership for others. So that should never base how I kind of interact or live myself, because I'm always going to go back to the word of God. And what does the word of God teach me? That again, there's no partiality, there's no at the same time, like, that God is love, and if he is love, that I'm to love the same way that he loved me. There was never any partiality in the scripture, at any moment. And so that's who we are and who we will be always, no matter what leadership is in place. Because we should never let the circumstance run me. I should be the one to hold on to God during that time, so the circumstances don't really faze me. But my relationship with Christ is constantly becoming more in his image every day.
Thank you.
Sure.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so I think there's a question. What would you say to people who try to compare Black racism with the church's persecution? Well, I think very easily, like, one is a religious ideology and is against religion. And so there's a difference there between that kind of ideology and an ideology of racism that is against anyone that's of different skin or color or background. It's completely different. One is through the government, by the government, and by leadership. And one is, tend to be radical Islam and is not kind of a, it's not the same thing. They're two different things.
I'm looking at it like, I don't know if maybe I'm the one who is misunderstanding the question, Abuna, and maybe Abuna Bishoi, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm looking at it like, Black racism and the church's persecution both faces oppression. One faces oppression out of, Christianity is something that we choose. Religion, we choose to be religious. We choose to be Coptic Orthodox. So if, people who are persecuted, they were persecuted because of a faith that we chose, It's you have that freedom because Christ gives us that freedom. But on the other hand, we see, Black racism or becoming a persecution that is to somebody who did not choose to be born in that color. I don't know if that's the same thing, but I'm looking at them as if they're related. And I think as a child that is persecuted, I'm always saying that we should even be more compassionate or more understanding to the issue of what the Black people are facing because we come from a child that is persecuted. I don't know if someone has Abuna. That's just how it's.
Yeah, I do agree with you, Grace, and I think it's a tragedy for both. It's a condition of human. It's a fallenness and sinful behavior to discriminate against individuals, and unfortunately, it's become a common trend, even in the 21st century. And there's a lot of history of persecution or racism against the Black communities, and it's very real. And anyone who is trying to belittle it or to say well, the 21st century or this or that, it is still very real and exists in our context, and it exists in our churches. And unfortunately, the same people who are crying because of persecution against Christians, they're the same ones who are inflicting horrible conditions to fellow brothers and sisters in the faith or outside the faith. And I see here one of the questions that Cain speaks about, persecution towards the Black community due to their skin color, and how can we, beauty and all of these perceptions and stereotypes, they're very, very deeply embedded within the Coptic community. I think these times are a wake-up call for all of the Copts, for all of the Christians, to say, to acknowledge persecution against Christians, but to say what kind of racist remarks or conditions we have embedded within the Coptic community itself that needs to be reformed, that needs to be addressed, so we don't make fellow Christians, brothers and sisters who are of different ethnicities, the target of these racist remarks. Like tomorrow marks the feast of the strong saint of Moses, the Ethiopian, and this is a big feast in the church that we should all celebrate, but also we should be vigilant about what kind of racist remarks are mentioned in his story, and say that these are incorrect or inaccurate or miscommunicated by the church somehow. We should be vigilant. We should care for ourselves and resolve issues from within that impact us as a community, and it's in our hands. Like, we can't always see how or change how people see us as Christians, but we can change the way that we look upon one another as Christians. So reform starts from within, not from without.
Hi, everybody. I just want to jump on this and ask a question. They say this connects to the question on shadism or like colorism there. And, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. And my question is, I think the icons in a church say a lot. And I've noticed, in some churches, Saint Moses is really, really fair. He actually looks Egyptian, as in olive skinned, not black skinned. You know what I mean? And same with some of our other African saints, who are black African saints. And how do we change that? Or sometimes when you see Jesus, blue eyes, blonde hair, being a person of Middle Eastern descent, he probably did not look like that. So I think that's another example of racism in our communities. And I'm just wondering, how can we change that? How can we challenge that? What are your thoughts on that? It's a big question.
Yeah, it's a huge question, Marianne.
I know there might not be an answer, but it's just something that I think is so critical because, first of all, historically, it's not accurate. And secondly, as well, for me personally, and for our Black brothers and sisters, when they walk in and they don't see that representation that should be there, I think it's very wounding, to be honest with you, right? And I guess those are just some of the issues that glare at me. And I've talked with Abuna Bishoy about how do we change the Synaxarium for St. Moses, not just at one church where you just read something different, but how do you change that across the world so that any person anywhere doesn't have to hear those remarks? Like I think what's hard for me is I don't know what the process of change is within a church. I can figure it out in a corporation, but I can't figure out in a church. Do you know what I mean? And so maybe there's no answer for this. I'm just raising it. Thank you.
I can comment a bit, and Marianne, we've had some conversations around that. We were very vigilant about the iconography in our church while it was being written, in the sense that we did not make Jesus look like a Swedish kind of hero or white Caucasian blue-eyed. Multiculturalism is very well represented within the iconography in the 24 presbyteries. St. Maurice looks very much African. Actually, the name Maurice literally means the one with the darker skin. So we made him look like an African with the darker skin. And because he was from Nubia, which is very much Black in its culture and community until today. Whenever possible, we observe that even the devil in his, portrayal is not like a kind of a Black being, which is unfortunate in some Coptic iconography. Christ with the children, the children around Christ is, he's portrayed, with many children from all around the world, from different skin colors. So it is definitely we were somewhat vigilant about these racial remarks, but I think more work needs to be done. Unfortunately, a lot of the iconography in the Coptic Church kind of adapted from Italian artwork and iconography, which portrays Jesus as very Western or white Caucasian. So that needs to be discussed also. It's part of our reform that we need to continue discussing, just like Grace was saying earlier, to make awareness, to ask questions. And it's gonna be the battle of this generation, really, to continue the conversation. And ultimately change comes, but it doesn't come without the shedding of blood.
And I think this is I think, Marianne, like realistically, I think it's going to be done within each church, and each church needs to make sure that they address that. I don't know if, and like Abuna said, I think the next generation, that change will come. But we're able to have these conversations now, which we weren't able to before. And so, we've held quite a number of youth meetings around this and talked about this specific issue, which before we would have never done that. So that's huge. That's been something that I didn't think would ever happen, and it did. And unfortunately, it took death of someone to do that, but it did start having those conversations. And I think it has to happen individually. At least we start in our own homes and in our own communities, in our own churches, and then, over time, God willing, as the next generations come up, that will also it'll be a change for sure.
Thank you, Abuna and Abuna. And Abuna, I appreciate that at SMSV. I think my question was just like beyond SMSV, like how, you know what I mean? Like how do we get the change to spread out a little bit more? And yeah, that was just part of thinking a little bit bigger so that people all over the world kind of can have that experience. Thank you.
So Amir Butros has his hand raised. I believe he has a follow-up on something that was mentioned. Amir, if you could.
Thank you, Samer. So like I think in regards to like the image of like Jesus and the iconography and so on, like because I've heard about this before, like we as people who believe in Jesus, we would like to see our like God's image in ourselves. So like if you go to churches like in Asian countries like China or whatever, you would see Jesus drawn in yellow skin and tight eyes. If you go to churches in Africa, you will see Jesus drawn with dark skin. So we wouldn't say that those are people are like they have tendencies in racism or anything. Like Jesus can be drawn in any different kinds, depending on how people believe in whichever country they are. And I think God would appreciate and celebrate the differences that we have in each other. Like each one of us would have an image or a representation of God in their mind, and not one of them would be called right or wrong, but all of them can be applicable. So we can also have that same sort of like mentality when we deal with people, even though the ones who differ from us, even from the people who are actually have racism or they like persecute us because of our religion. We can still see sometimes we can see the image of God in them, even if it doesn't show up in their evil doings. Like the biggest example we have for that is like Saint Paul, because before that he used to persecute Christians, and God saw in them someone who can become the biggest messenger for Christianity in the early church period. So with that kind of mindset that we can have, I think that's the best way we can look into this kind of issue in a different view. Just my input here. Thank you.
Thank you, Amir. After Father Mena and Grace's permission, maybe I would like to address this question. The challenge here, Amir, is that something that has come upon in the last maybe 4 to 5 centuries, which is called white privilege. White privilege is connected with the Crusades, white power, suppression of other ethnicities, conversion by force, slavery. So all of these acts have been connected with, being white, European, Caucasian. And the vision or the motion of changing Jesus's image into, a white Jesus has been heavily criticized, because in their mind they're relating, Jesus has become the savior of, the white race, or, the Caucasian race, who is very much connected with these horrendous acts against humanity in the past few centuries. So to portray Jesus as white and let's say the devil as black, that speaks volumes on people's perception of whiteness and blackness. The other concern which comes to, let's say, the Coptic church in specific, while you might say that okay, whites are going to portray Jesus as white, black Africans are going to portray him this way, or Asians. Why are we portraying Jesus as white, blue eyes and blonde hair within the Coptic church and iconography, even though the Copts traditionally are not, Africans, but are not Europeans or white Caucasian? So we have to be extremely careful, because the whole concept of white privilege has given a huge advantage to people of white race or white skin against against people of different colors of skin. So the concept here is that as a church, we need to be extremely sensitive, because what we draw on the walls of the church represent a position. makes a statement and reflects on who we are as individuals and as people, what we believe in, etc. We can't just say, well, Jesus is this because he is, portrayed by Europeans. So just be careful, and when we understand history, we would come to understand the oppression that happened to a lot of people due to these depictions or these ideologies.
Thank you, Abuna. And how the devil is represented as the black, what comes to my mind is the icon. that's what you were gonna say.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That's what we talked about. We talked about an icon.
Okay, yeah. So the icon for one of the saints, and we have Saint George. Saint George, and also Archangel Michael to some extent. Yeah, Archangel Michael, and the picture there is that Archangel Michael is like this white guy, and then underneath is a black guy. So what happened once, I have a story. I was talking to someone who does the icons for our church. She's a lovely lady. She's American, and she changed it to the color green. And someone came up to her and was like, "Why are you making, that green?" And it's like, "Yeah, because why? What do you want?" And she was like, "It should be black." I was like, "No," and no, like we took that opportunity to educate that person and to show how racist and how wrong that that was depicted, and they totally understood. And I was also having another conversation the other day with someone from our diocese who had sent a picture to the Pope, and he sent me the message, and the Pope said it's very wrong what has become of society, and he had only sent a picture of a beautiful icon that he found of Archangel Michael, and he had not noticed. And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's the one I'm talking about, the picture below." And he was like, "Oh, now I get why the Pope was like, this is so wrong. This is what the society has become." Because to him, his mind, he's always grown up looking at that icon as it was, the white and the black devil. And we had a discussion. He said that he did not actually realize that until my talk with him, that maybe that's what made the Pope sad, considering what is happening around lately. So I think, I think we have a long way to go, and I think it's just bringing out those small things when we notice, and just not just say them, but explain and explain where you're coming from. And maybe that ties us to that question of, oh, that one has gone, of how do you speak to the older generation that perceives lighter skin as more acceptable or desirable? Was it that one? Yeah, it's not an easy conversation. Like I said, it has to come from love and from understanding, and from, you have to be in a really good place, what I've noticed, because for the time that I was talking to someone who I really respect and someone who's much older than me, we were going back and forth on a text message, and I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to you so that we can agree to disagree, that you will have your views and I'll have my views, but you're going to air them respectfully. At the end, if we come to an understanding, then we win, And I explained, based on like what I had learned about the history of the African community and what is happening and the facts and all the things that are going through, and I linked them up to everything, and how as a church we are so blessed, and we are so, we are, even the congregation, we have connection. We come from Egypt or Kenya, and I know someone from church, and someone knows someone, and someone will teach me how to either make an application to the college or to like get a job here and get a job there. And then I was telling her about like somewhere like Baltimore, which is one of the saddest, poorest, places. And me saying that, coming from Kenya, it's really like a big deal that I think Baltimore is really sad and poor. But it is. And also it's because I'm looking at the surroundings, and I was explaining to them that they have no opportunities in that place. So it's very hard for anyone to get out of that system if the government doesn't do anything. And unfortunately, the government it hasn't done anything for the longest time. And until people realizes that it's not just, black people are like lazy, or black people are like criminals, and, and generalizing things, just understand where they're coming from. And maybe you'll be more compassionate. So it's like trying to explain from a from a place of love and creating that environment where you respectfully talk about things and bring out facts. I saw there was a question that was asked twice: how do we positively engage this difficult conversation? I think that making others feel uncomfortable due to various reasons. I think the reason that people feel uncomfortable is because it's and maybe you're gonna forgive me for saying this. I think it's because I'm convicted, like if I'm feeling upset, I'm convicted. And as long as you're not coming from a place of judgment, and rather you're speaking from love, with love and only trying to communicate that which you want that person to learn, I think that it shouldn't be something that you can do. And on the other hand, you cannot control how people feel about certain situations. But at the same time, there are times when I've not spoken about things that I want to speak about, like, because I don't want to cause other people to stumble. I don't want someone else, get upset. But at the same time, I find a way to communicate to someone who will talk to me directly. And I'm like, this is what it is. It's tough, especially when we have very close people to us who don't understand. I'll give you a story of probably someone like my mother-in-law. Abuna is not here, I can tell you. So my mother-in-law is very sweet, and we were having a conversation about, and of course she's not racist. I'm married, to Abuna, and she's amazing. The whole family, like, God bless them. But we were having a conversation the other day, and she forwarded me this video of someone called Candice Owens. I don't know if you guys have, come across this young lady. She's very smart. She's very articulate, and a lot of people have been, especially Republicans and everyone who want to support the anti-Black Black Lives Matter and all that, have been really sending me those videos to educate myself. And I'm like, let's, and so from her point of view, she had really good points. And I was like, yeah, actually this lady, she's explaining everything that is happening and what, the Black people are going through, and the reason that they are going through, and everything she was talking about are things that we, that some people don't know, like the lack of the father figure in the family, because why they are in prison. Because, and I was telling her, they are also in prison because when they commit a crime, the similar crime a white person would do, will get a different time in prison than their Black counterpart, things like that. And she was like, oh, so we had a conversation from something that she was giving me to to hear, and I brought my other part that I had learned about it, and we agreed, and she was like very enlightened. So it's hard, but I think God always will give us the grace and the leeway to discuss those very, very tough topics with people that we really love, without losing them and without feeling like, oh my goodness, I cannot continue with this conversation with you. I mean, I've had moments like that with some of my friends, and I'm like, okay, I can't have, and I'm like, I cannot have this conversation because I don't want to upset you, and I don't want to get upset, and this is not the right time to discuss this. And just go back, pray, and I'm sure God will create another opportunity for you to have those conversations. But yeah, I don't want to talk too much.
Thank you. I think it's so important to have discernment, as you mentioned. Okay, does anybody else have any questions from anywhere? Speak now or forever hold your peace. No, I'm joking. Do not forever hold. We need to keep the conversation going. So, alrighty. Okay, well, it's approaching 9:30. So I guess if nobody has anything else that they would like to share, to say, we'll conclude with a prayer. But I just want to thank you so much. We're just overjoyed that you came to join us, and we know you have very busy lives, so with 2 active kids, so thank you for kind of sacrificing family time, especially to be with us. And I just want to appreciate your commitment to justice, but at the same time your commitment to hope and grace and mercy, and keeping the dialogue open even when it's really hard to do so. And I think that's the key. So thank you for modeling that for us and just giving us a word of hope in this.
Thank you guys.
Thank you too.
It was
Thank
great
you.
to be with you guys. Thank you so much.
We would really be blessed if one of you could close us off in prayer.
Yeah. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Dear Heavenly Lord, we come before you this night. We just want to thank you so much for allowing us to fellowship with each other tonight and to truly learn so much from each other. We thank you because you have allowed us to talk about things that we truly could not have had a chance to talk about. You've allowed us to experience them so that we can be able to talk from our own experiences. And above all, I know that you're working with each and every one of us to be able to look back and say, truly, that was God. And we see your hand in each and everything that is happening around. Father, I pray that you continue to shelter us as you have always in your love, and to put it in our heart to always speak the truth and speak the truth in love, and truly to care for you, for your loved ones, to care for your people, to care for our brothers and sisters who are suffering. And truly ask that each and every one of us ask the question of, what can I do for my brothers who is hurting? What can I do for my sister? And above all, God, I pray that you help us to do a self-examination to see where we truly stand in each and everything that is happening. I pray that you may help us to face our fears and our worries, and to just be vulnerable before you and open our hearts and ask that you take care of us, that you help us to get better, that you help us to heal so that we can be able to also help other people. Thank you so much for Abuna. Thank you for the SMSV community and every person that truly has arranged for this. And above all, God, thank you for the gift of life and health during this really hard times with the pandemic. And I pray that you continue to protect your children wherever they are. I thank you and I praise you. Thank you. Praying all this through the prayers of all the saints.